Hey there, and welcome to The Aspiring Professional. I'm your host, Michael Simonton, and each week I'll be joined by a professional to talk about some of the traits and qualities that guided them to their success. Through this, we hope to provide some insights and advice for all of the aspiring professionals out there to help propel them along their journey to success. Thank you for joining us, and if you like the podcast, don't forget to hit subscribe so that each week you can get more of this awesome content. Good evening, Nick. Thanks for jumping on today, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
Perfect, man. I'm glad to have you. From what I've understood and what I hear about you, you're like quite the formidable force in the sales roles that you have, and it's pretty good. So, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, this podcast is primarily focused on providing some information and solid advice for aspiring professionals out there to take to heart, to help apply them and kickstart them into their careers, and to just give some guidance as they figure out those first couple months, years after high school or college or whatever it is. So, without further ado, let's just jump right into it, sir. If you don't mind, could I get a little background on who you are, what you do, and how you got there?
Yeah, sure.
And I understand that's 3 questions, so take your time.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So born and raised in Virginia, that's where I'm living now. I spent a few years out in Atlanta doing the Praxis apprenticeship, which is something that you might have talked a little bit about in the past. But yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been naturally curious about psychology and influence. And I was the kid that was like trading cards and stuff in the neighborhood. I was the kid that was selling candy in high school and laser pens, which ultimately turned into to be a problem. So I stopped, but, I made a lot of money because I was good at it and it was super fun. And in my head, it was always framed as this like really stupidly, painfully obvious thing of just like, I have something that you want and you have dollars that I want. So let's just exchange those and it's a win-win and it's good. And we both are happy. And that's all what sales is at a very fundamental level. If you can help someone solve a problem and they pay you for it, then you're both, net beneficiaries of the transaction. So, that's what I ultimately pursued. I was in college and I was actually studying engineering, but what I was doing throughout that whole time was running a business buying and selling precious metals. And I found that to be 10 times minimum more fulfilling, interesting, engaging. I could do the number crunching and stuff, but I just applied everything that I was learning about programming and numbers and math to like business. And so it was just way more interesting of a field. And so ultimately I dropped out of college 2 classes short of getting a engineering degree. And I started, TT Coins. So the legacy of which still lives on through my YouTube, where I was making a ton of like educational content and videos, some of which got tens of thousands of views, which is really cool. And I was doing that for a while. And then I found Praxis and I was like, okay, this seems like the next logical step. So I got hooked up with a apprenticeship through that program. And, maybe for your listeners who don't know, Praxis is basically a personal and professional development boot camp. You pay something like 14 grand for this 1-year program, but they also hook you up with an apprenticeship that pays you at a minimum like 15, 16 grand. So it pays for itself. You learn a ton and you get a job at the end of it. That's the basic spiel. But, I did that and I was doing sales down in Atlanta and I fucking loved it. And I quickly, rose through the ranks or whatever and started managing a team, being an account executive. And, I learned a lot about office politics actually through that whole thing because the company was kind of insane looking back on it. Ultimately I quit that and I started a competitor. The reason why I started a competitor is they did something extremely unscrupulous. They said, hey, if you guys quit, we're going to take half of your commissions 90 days before you quit. And I was like, oh, that sounds criminal and screw you and all of the goodwill that we once had for each other. Like, that's not cool at all. They were screwing over their employees, which isn't a good thing. So I started a competitor, and I learned the hard way that, even if I can go fly to New York and meet with the president of the, company at the largest customer that I had and close him and start selling him supplies for Fortune 500 banks to put in their data centers, I did that, but it was super fucking unfulfilling. And I was depressed and I was miserable and I hated what I was doing. And it turns out that you can't start a company out of spite in an industry that you're not passionate in and be successful in the long run. So would not recommend ever doing that again. Even if I did it ethically and I didn't take customer lists and stuff with me, it was still in the long run, just like not the right move. So that's when I started looking into remote work and trying to see what kind of opportunities were out there. If I could have location independence, but still be in sales. And I found this company, Toggl. And Toggl is a time tracking tool. Their headquarters is in Tallinn, Estonia, which is kind of like the San Francisco Bay of Europe almost. And so I've been like really diving deep into, they were a company that never had a sales team before, but they grew to like 400,000 daily users and 10 million in revenue. And so I've just been like building and implementing this structure from scratch. And it's been teaching me so much about just so many things. So it's like really good, fulfilling work. And that's kind of, I guess, what I've been up to on the professional side. And I would wrap it up by adding the personal side. I'm pretty much a nerd. I've spent more than 10,000 hours playing PC, shoot 'em up video games and other stuff like that. I'm a geek for board games. I like physical exercise and I prefer the steam room over the sauna. In fact, the steam room is the number one therapeutic tool that has ever been invented by the mind of man. And that's the sentiment I will end on.
That is phenomenal, sir. That story is quite crazy. I know you went from selling laser pens to, it sounded like you worked full time in college while you were going.
Yeah, just like running my own business. So
yeah. And wow, I had no idea about any of that. So that's phenomenal. You've done a lot so far. I could see,
thank you.
See why you know so much. That's awesome, man. That's perfect because like that means you're just a wealth of information that we get to or are able to dive into. So like, what three main traits would you credit your success to then? Because you mentioned the nerd side, the geek, the intellectual curiosity, and your love for psychology. Mm-hmm. So like, what would you say those are?
Well, I have to, I think that the number one thing that's helped me the most has been like internal curiosity and like a desire for self-knowledge. Because there was a podcast that I no longer follow because I think that the host of the show has really strown away from these types of values. But the podcast that I liked at the time was called Free Domain Radio. And in there, they talked a lot about how if you get into therapy and you focus on self-improvement and self-knowledge and surrounding yourself with like really quality people that share your values, that you can live a much better life. And it's like, well, that's not controversial. That's really straightforward. Why didn't anyone in public school or my family or anyone teach me that those are like important things to seek out? So I started seeking them out and I got into therapy. And therapy has like by far been like the number one investment that I could have possibly made in my entire life. Because it just helped me unwind that like tense knot of like charcoal burned sense of a self that I thought I had, but really didn't. I was just kind of like a ball of anxiety that was trying to please other people. And it's helped me really just like step into my authentic self a lot more. So I would attribute that as like the number one thing. It's like focusing on self-knowledge and personal growth. It's always been something that's attractive to me. So second thing, I have to credit my dad with instilling a belief in me that you can always write your own ticket in life. And that manifests in like so many different ways. It's really mind-boggling. So like I'll just give one example. When I was in college and running TT Coins, there was a semester off or whatever, and I was like, you know what? I really want to work at a coin store, but there are no coin stores hiring around me. How do I just get hired at a coin store? So if you ask yourself that kind of question, you get a different answer. Like you don't want to just settle for, oh, look up job listings. Oh, there are none. Okay, I guess there's no opportunity. It's like, no, just create your own opportunity. So there's this idea of a value proposition that Praxis teaches people. And I implemented this and it worked flawlessly for me every time I've ever tried. The basic premise is if you approach someone and you say, hey, I've identified specific problems that you have. I would like to solve them. On top of that, here's exactly what I'm going to do for the next 30 days to help you solve these problems. And icing on the cake, this is optional. Icing on the cake is I'm actually going to work for you completely free of charge. And I'll start solving these problems for you. And if you deem that my work is quality at the end of this period of me working for you for free, then we can talk about payment. But I'm not going to accept any money for you. I'm just going to work for you for free. So when I approached this coin store and I was like, hey, I'm sure you do a lot of business. You've been around for a lot of years, but I noticed that your eBay page is kind of, empty almost. And you probably spend a lot of time just like inventorying stuff and on admin work that just is a waste of your time. So let me take care of all the stuff that you hate to do and let me start making you more money through eBay. And they, of course, didn't object to that. I did so. I immediately started turning around like 10K in revenue per month on eBay. And I was like, all right, so do I have a job? And they're like, yep. So that's how I got the experience that I wanted in the field that was relevant. I just started doing it. And that all comes from a mindset of you don't have to walk down the well-trodden path of like how society prescribes you to live or do things. People, the only reason why there's any like structure in society is because someone made it up. So you're a someone. You can just make it up. And like the deeper and more like thoroughly that you internalize that, it really starts to open your mind to different possibilities. Like, wow, I could just fly to Argentina and like drop a shipping container into a random piece of property that I bought for $6,000 and I could live sustainably for under 20K. It's like no one thinks like that. And that's not even like a particularly clever example, but like, yeah, I would say that thinking about writing your own ticket in life is definitely something that's helped a lot. Huh. What would the third one be? I think that, we're about as strong as like the average person that we surround ourselves with. And there's a very common quote, like you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. But, I think that the more that I've focused on making and like actually being selective with those 5, the more that I've been able to receive like healthy criticism and pushback that I deem like actually worth listening to. And I've been able to course correct away from making really bad decisions that my dumbass would have made on my own, and mitigate the damage from decisions that my dumbass still made anyway, even though I knew it was the wrong thing to do. And I think that the quality of those relationships with people who I truly love, and sort of share the same core values, I think that like actively seeking and cultivating that and caring deeply about relationships and people, that's got to be in the top 3.
That's perfect. Oh, did that play a role at all in you seeking remote work?
Well, I've always, it's been hard because I have always had a really strong online community, but I mean, virtually most of my life, I have not had a very strong in-person community. Now, when I was in Atlanta, that's the best it's ever been. I had friends, several friends who were awesome people who I loved a lot through the Praxis community, that were a stone's throw away, and that was beautiful. But now I'm back in Virginia, and that's gone again. And man, it's just, the ability to freely travel anywhere. That's a huge thing for me because I want to definitely be able to like see and absorb and experience, but also to like connect and like break bread with people that I love and care about. So I'd say, yeah, that matters.
Perfect. So just to reiterate, you'd say focusing on personal growth, like self improvement, self-knowledge, and then write your own ticket to destiny. I love that one. Write your own ticket in your life. That's a phenomenal mindset. And I think that's really the differentiator between, I don't know, the do's and the don'ts, like the people the doers and the thinkers, and the dreamers. Like the fact that you are willing and able and believe that you can change and write your own ticket in life is phenomenal. And then like you're the average of the 5 people. I think that is something that's not stressed enough. Like we hear it, but no one really thinks about it or takes it to heart. Just based on my personal life, personal experience, and people I've talked to, that's some gold right there, sir. Do you find yourself, so you're very selective then in who you choose and who you have in your personal life and who you lean on? Has that made that harder to form more genuine connections? Because like you hit that point where you really like this person, you're getting along great, but you're like, listen, man, some things just aren't aligning as like I wish they would. How do you approach a situation like that? Because I'm sure everyone has that question.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. And, recently my relationship, I've been thinking about, where do I go too far with that? Am I actually pushing people away by like being too guarded or too selective? So there's like definitely a balance to be struck there. Can you ask the question again?
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do you approach those situations? Where do you draw the line when you have these great friends and these relationships that you've built, but you see that your values don't necessarily align as you like or as they should, like where you're both benefiting or one of them's not like a drag or an anchor? And how do you approach that? Like where would you draw the line?
Yeah. I think that you kind of have to think about it like what actually matters the most and then peel back from there. So if you really heavily super value your politics as like your deepest thing that you have to be in alignment with someone on for whatever reason, then I would start there. But for me, I try to get a real gut assessment of, is this person honest? Are they genuine? Are they authentic? Do they have the ability to think? Is there something about them that I like that I wish that I had more of? And it's like, that's the kind of person at the end of the day, regardless of, where their, topical views might be. That's in general who I want to surround myself with. Can I learn from them? Are they inspiring in some way? But not everyone hits that bill and they can still be really interesting, cool people. Like, yeah, and I do have friends that don't like quote inspire, right? But they're just like funny as shit, But it's interesting because like in a lot of ways, humor can be kind of like a barrier to depth and intimacy, and that is something to look out for. And that particular friend, I try to push towards depth whenever possible. Which always works out well. It's never like an awkward thing or whatever. He always appreciates it. But yeah, I don't know. Once I discover firm guidelines and boundaries, I will let you know. That's still very much a work in progress.
Thank you. I mean, well, obviously those are going to vary on the situation and the individual. I was just curious to get some guidelines there. So then, knowing what you know now, and having those 3 traits that like really got you to where you are today, if you were talking to yourself 4 years ago, if you're giving yourself some advice and guidance, what would that be?
The first thing that comes to mind is like, it's a good thing that you're taking things seriously, Nick, but don't beat yourself up relentlessly over not matching up to your abstract ideal standard that basically you'd have to be a Greek god in order to actually do. Like, don't, and just know that everything is ultimately going to be just fine. Like, if you fuck up, you'll be fine. If you don't fuck up and you make like incredible decisions, you'll be fine. Your problems will always expand at exactly the right rate for you to be able to handle them as they come in. That is like super key. I would need to tell myself that probably a couple 100 times because I wouldn't listen, but that's key. Trying to think of something else.
If that's all you've got, I mean, that's good in and of itself, but we can think through some more. Because I know many of us have that tendency to beat up on ourselves when we think, we have this ideology in our mind, this vision of who we'd like to be and the goals we'd like to be achieving, and we just don't come. We always fall short. But that's the whole purpose of the goals, is to get us to move. Like you aim at the highest mountain and you slowly progress.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. And that's probably the best thing that I could possibly tell myself, because then I wouldn't be so anxious and miserable when I like self-sabotage or somehow screw things up, or, all these things. So yeah, maybe I will leave it there.
This is your show, sir. This is where you let me know when you're done. But if we're leaving it there, it sounds like your realities and expectations didn't always align then. No. Would you mind expounding on that a little bit? Like, what did you think you were going to be doing today? And then what are you exactly you're doing today? Like, how did those align? And were they better or worse?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the transition between doing the precious metals business, TT Coins, and Praxis. My expectation was, okay, I'm going to move out of my folks' place. I'm going to get my own place. I'm going to dip into my savings until I can make this thing profitable. I need to sell this many coins in order to do that. That's my goal. And I started to reach that breaking point of like, wow, if I keep doing this and I keep producing at the level that I'm producing, I could actually sustain this and break free. And at that exact moment, that's when I started getting like cripplingly depressed. Just like, oh fuck, I have no motivation to do anything. I am sleeping 12 hours a day. I feel miserable. I have to go home because I just can't do this. There's no point. I'm just bleeding money. And that was a horrific blow to like my self-esteem, my self-image. I felt horrible. And like in the moment, I don't think I could have seen past that and seen like just how beautifully that would cause me to like internally reflect on what was going on, take therapy and self-knowledge seriously, like persist beyond that depression and find a program like Praxis and actually go through with it, moving to a new city and experiencing new challenges. Like in the moment, that was like the worst thing that had ever happened to me. But in the grand scheme of things, it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And I can't think of a more picture perfect example of that in my life than exactly that.
It's oftentimes those moments where you think you've hit rock bottom that actually like really define your life in a positive way. Like if you reframe it, if you have the right mentality, that can be the propellant, that can be like the rocket fuel that just takes your career off, your personal life off, and just brings you to a whole other place that you never thought you would have gotten. Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah. So then they were good then, or they were bad? Like,
wait, what was good? What was bad?
The expectations. So you were expecting one thing. Like, how did it work out in the end? Did you think you would be doing something differently? Because today I don't know exactly like what the living situation is, or if you're back with your family, so it feels like you regressed back there. But it almost sounds like you hit a point, and then everything changed. And I'm just curious, which like was it the good change? It was good change, obviously, but
yeah. I think long term things, it was really good. And like the vision at the beginning of it was become like the youngest influencing like star in the precious metals industry, and like make a big ruckus and name for myself and like make lots of money. It's like, okay, that didn't happen, but I made a dent in the universe and I was able to readjust my priorities. And at this point, having worked in other businesses, I'm much, much, much better suited if and when I do decide to take the route of entrepreneurship than I was as a 19-year-old kid just winging it for the first time. So I definitely think that it's a positive trajectory. The things came out in a strange, like strangely more beautiful and perfect than I could have anticipated with the limited knowledge and perspective that I had.
Right on. Perfect. So then you're in sales now, correct?
Yes.
Like, what is the exact role?
Yeah, sales team lead. So I have a few account executives that I manage, and then I also more or less build out all of the sales structure and documentation and work with the product teams to like implement new features and work with marketing, yada, yada.
Okay, perfect. So then if you were talking to someone just getting started in sales, or you when you just started in your role, what actionable advice, what steps can they take to do better, to accelerate, to double down on their strengths and weaknesses, to get their career really going in the right direction?
Yeah. Well, I would come back to this thing of like self-knowledge being paramount. And I would say, if you're in sales and you're brand new to it, start listening to your calls. As painful as that might sound or be, like, hit record, listen to how you sound. Listen to the specific verbs that you're using that turn prospects off. Listen to the ones that turn them on and excite them to your product. And like, it's a self-iterating process of you hear yourself fail. You like write down what you should do different. You do different, you succeed. And then you fail in different ways. And you keep repeating that over and over. The next thing I would say is always give at least 110% of what is expected of you. Because in the overwhelming majority of situations, not that much is going to be expected of you. If you're an SDR, you're going to be expected to make 50 calls a day and send 20 emails. So make 55 and send 22. And you will notice immediately, it does not take time to receive this feedback. Everyone around you will be happy with you. They'll be impressed. Your results most likely won't just be 10% greater than your peers either. Jordan Peterson cites a statistic that people who work 10% more hours make 40% more income. And that's certainly true in sales. The harder you work, the more you earn, and it's a non-linear return. So that's definitely a way to speed up the success of your career. Yeah, I mean, if I just left it at that, that's enough for anyone to chew on, really.
Absolutely. Well, where do you see yourself in the next couple of years? Let's hear it. It sounds like, because you've done so much already, I can't imagine you have an accurate, like a specific image, but what do you want to do next?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm as into self-knowledge, look at yourself as I am. I find it incredibly difficult to consistently plan the future. Like I've like set soft goals in the past, but I just kind of like, oh, cool, it's on a little post-it note in the bathroom, and I glance at it, and like that's the extent to which I think of it. So it's always interesting when people ask, like, what do you want in 5 years, 10 years? So 2 years seems a little bit more predictable and realistic. I think that within 2 years, I want to have a brand built up around expertise in sales. And I want to leverage everything that I'm learning at Toggl into this personal brand. I also think that at Toggl, I want to either have some kind of position like sales director or VP of sales, or maybe in the weird event that they hire like a better manager for the team, be a strategic account executive and like only go after like the big whale massive deals. Something like this. But I think that sales director, VP of sales would be the most enticing thing. Yeah. And I just want to like dramatically expand my income. I want to know a lot more about finance than I do right now, because I feel like I'm an idiot. I'm completely uneducated. I like just set up a budget last week. So I'm like what's the difference between a mutual fund and an ETF? How do I do anything? So yeah, those are some of the things that are front and center on my mind. Right on.
How? Because it sounds like you're killing it at your job. How'd you get there? How'd you manage to pull that off? I'm gonna say, with only soft goals, because goals is like the number one advice most people tell you. They're like, make sure you set your SMART goals, your specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. But it sounds like your goals really consist of Post-it notes on your bathroom window mirror. So, So what do you think? What do you think got you? Like, how did that align? How did that work out? Because I know there's some of us out there who don't set goals, but we still manage to do good.
Yeah, I think that has to just do with mindset. Maybe in some convoluted way, goals are just a proxy to focusing your mind on the specific priorities that would lead you to the outcome that you want. And maybe if you just have a mindset that's conducive to that outcome anyway, you'll just generally do the things that you would if you had a SMART goal in place. So I'm always trying to help other people. I'm always trying to become a better version of myself. I'm always irrationally self-critical when I make mistakes. And because I take that too seriously, I tend to improve a little bit quicker, I think, because, ow, it hurts when I whip myself. Let me not do the thing that makes me whip myself, you know? Yeah, I know it sounds totally ridiculous, but hey, it works.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's Nick. Honestly, this has been an absolute pleasure, sir. I have so many questions that I could sit here for like an hour and go through. Mm-hmm. But I did put this on a time restraint, so I'll keep it to that. If any of my guests or listeners would like to find you, where can they do that?
Sure. Go to nickrundlett.com. That is where there's a contact me page, but honestly, you can just drop me an email. My email is my name. It's nick@rundlett.com.
Perfect, sir. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, no, it'd be my pleasure, Michael. And yeah, let's keep in touch. Have a great rest of the weekend. It was great talking to you.
Perfect. Cheers.